everyone, and welcome. We're out here in my garden, and as we normally do when we're out here, we're checking in my outdoor worm bin. This is my outdoor worm bin, worm bag, if you want to consider it that. It was just recently moved into this bag. It had originally been in this upside down garbage pail that you see right beneath it. I'm just propping it up here to make it a little easier for access. But this garbage pail that you see even closer over here, this is what I consider not to be my outdoor worm bin, but my outdoor composting bin. Nevertheless, it is loaded with tons and tons of worms. And the worms that inhabit this bin were not worms that I placed in here. They're all worms that made their way into this container, all on their own. They just came out of the soil, came up into here because there's constantly kitchen scraps and garden waste and all kinds of stuff being loaded into here. And the fascinating thing about this container is that the level never seems to rise. In fact, it almost seems like the level drops every time I look in here, because the container is loaded with not only worms, but also the larvae of black soldier flies, which when it comes to composting, they completely outdo worms. The black soldier flies, sorry, I was distracted. A little chipmunk just ran out here, probably thinking I'm gonna give him a little treat. Usually chipmunks see me out here and they come around for a peanut or two, because I give them treats sometimes. Maybe I'll run over there and give them a peanut. Yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back now. So what I've been doing lately is I've actually been using this bin as a place to source worms, and there's got to be thousands of them in here. I mean, seriously, thousands and thousands of earthworms. Red regulars, I believe, but I can't say for sure. And I've been using them to populate my worm bin. There's been a couple hauls already. I hauled out what I believe to be 1,000 on each occasion, so I believe I've got at least a couple thousand worms in here. And I was looking at coming back in here today to see if we could maybe scoop out another couple thousand, or maybe at least 1,000 if we're lucky. And then at that point, I believe that we'll have a pretty good population in this bag, and then I think I'll be good for a while. I think we'll maybe take this to a population of about 3,000. And I guess the other thing we could do when we check in here is we could check in on a head of lettuce that I put in here a few days ago. So 3 days ago, when I checked in on my my night crawlers down in the basement, I made a video about that, but then later that day I noticed in the crisper in the refrigerator an old head of lettuce that had gone bad, so I pulled that out of there and threw it into here. And after 3 days, I'll be curious to see how the worms are doing on it. So let's begin down in here by trying to scoop out some worms. So a lot of times when we check in on this bin, we usually begin by seeing a piece of cardboard covering things up here. But when I came out here this morning, it looked like some creature, whatever it may have been, I don't know what, came in here rummaging for scraps and just totally trashed that piece of cardboard. So I'm gonna have to fashion a fresh cardboard covering for this. Not that it's all that important, but I just like to keep it covered, because then when I come in here and peek under it, a lot of times I could see a lot of stuff that would normally not be there if not for the darkness that the cover provides. So I guess what I'm gonna do here is just take a quick peek down the middle, because that's usually where the most interesting stuff is. That's where I've been loading all the food, so that's kind of where you would expect to see much of the action. But I guess maybe because the cardboard covering was not over the container, there's not the presence of creatures that you would normally expect to see in here. You can see not a lot of care is taken with the stuff that goes into this bin. So you can see a piece of rubber band, and here we could see the label off of some piece of vegetable or fruit. So yeah, you know, I try to take good care of cleaning my food for the worms that are in the basement of this sort of stuff, but here I don't worry so much about it. But if I see it, I'll take it out if I happen to spot it. So I think over here on the outer edge, we're starting to catch some signs of some of the inhabitants of this bin. Like, for example, right here is it's a black soldier fly, which is, I believe it's at the stage where it has kind of gone dormant. When they're younger, they're a lot lighter in color and they're, you know, very active. But once they get to the point where they've grown large enough to transform into a fly, they get really dark in color like this. and then they'll try to distance themselves from the food source so that within the within this skin of theirs they can turn into a fly. But here on this one, it looks like the very tip of the yeah, this thing's empty. So it looks like this is one that has already transformed into a fly and has crawled out of its old skin. But it's these little guys that we normally see in here in great numbers, working away the food. But now that the temperatures are starting to drop, I'm believing that we're probably going to see fewer and fewer of these little guys, and eventually probably see none. But if we work our way down a little bit deeper, in here we can already see a number of different sized ones. You can see, you know, fairly small ones over here, much lighter in color. Here's a pretty dark colored one, still kind of active. And then hanging out in here too, we've got a worm. And it's really the worms that we've come in here for. And normally the middle of this bin is quite warm with the activity of the black soldier flies, making it so warm that the worms typically are found on the outer edge of this container. So I'll normally go picking around the outer edge looking for worms to take out of here. So I'm going to pile some of the stuff that's on the outer edges inwards, give us slightly easier access to the outer edge. And then we're going to start scooping out some worms. I've got my little plastic container here to put the worms into once we get some. And usually I end up with a handful of all kinds of other stuff in addition to what I believe to be a bunch of worms. And I just take all that stuff right over. So like here we're seeing a pretty decent number of worms here in this handful. I also try to get selective sometimes, and I try to like leave behind a lot of these larger chunks of food, which is really kind of a waste of time because there's really no separating this stuff. It's just easiest to go ahead and grab a whole handful of the stuff and as is take it over into the other bin, and it'll all serve as food for them in their new space. But I guess if I find larger sticks and things like this that I know would be slow composting items that I don't really want in my worm bin, I can leave them behind. Let's see what else we can come up with here. All kinds of food items down in here, all kinds of worms hanging out in the material when you you know, just drop it over here on top and let the stuff scatter a little bit. You could see worms crawling around all over inside of it. So you can only imagine how many worms there must be in this whole container here. It's got to be tons of them. And it does seem like the material that they're occupying is pretty much finished compost, or maybe the droppings of the black soldier fly larvae, which I believe is not really known as compost. It's, I believe, known as frass. Insect droppings are called frass, while worm droppings are called castings or vermicompost. So let's keep making our way around here, see what we can see. Over here I'm seeing quite a lot of worms. Let's see what we can get. You can totally see this handful has all kinds of worms hanging out in it in great numbers. It does seem like I found a pretty good section over here. Here too, this handful looks like it's got a good number of worms in it. I guess after I dump it out, that'll give me the chance to see if I can pick out some of these larger items that I don't want to bring over. But, you know, I gotta get out of the habit of trying to do that. It's probably easiest just to take all the stuff along with them and let it all serve as food in the new location that they're being moved over to. Here too, quite a number of worms to be seen hanging out. Let's see what we could come up with over here. I guess some of these corn cobs I'll leave behind. No need to take up excess space here in this little tiny plastic tub with huge things that could be more worms. So let's get rid of some of these larger bits if we can, make a little bit more room if possible, just to bring over 1 or 2 more handfuls of worms. And naturally there's black soldier fly larvae coming along for the ride too, but like I said, these guys don't really work well into the colder months. So I believe that as time goes on, as the temperatures continue to drop, we're now about a week after Labor Day, into early September now. Well, more like mid-September at this point. It seems a lot more likely that we're going to see fewer and fewer black soldier fly larvae. This is pretty cool, seeing a corn cob that's completely hollowed out. And that always seems to be the place where the composters begin, is right there in the middle of the corn cob. They like to eat out the middle of the cob, and then the rest of it all gets consumed as well in time, but there must be something about the inside of the corn cob that the worms really like, and the black soldier flies really like. Here too, pretty good pile of worms in each handful. I always wonder how many I'm pulling out when I'm doing this, because it's so hard to tell. They're just, you know, mixed in with a pile of food scraps and compost and other things. It's very difficult to tell how many worms are being hauled out. But I'll typically estimate that a tub like this of worms mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff is probably somewhere in the range of about 1,000 or so worms. I think we've got room in here for maybe 1 more handful, and then we're gonna proceed to releasing these little guys into their new home. We made our way around the entire tub one time, so we'll see what else we can pull out here. Maybe 1 more handful. A whole bunch of peanut shells coming along for the ride. Somehow I feel like the peanut shells are going to take forever to break down, but that's fine. I'm not worrying about it. Oh, there's the chipmunk again. You can hear me out here doing stuff, getting curious, wondering if I'm going to give him a treat. I already left some peanuts for him earlier. Hopefully he found them, and he either ate them or hauled them down into his burrow. But for now, I think this is it. I got a whole bunch of corn husks that I need to pile in here too before I put this away, and then I've got to fashion a new circular cardboard cover for this thing. But yeah, this is such a fun bin. I always get a kick out of picking through here. All right, so let's head over to the outdoor worm bin and release these little guys. But before we go, I'm noticing a couple, even with all the disturbance that I caused in here, you can see that these black soldier flies are so docile. You would have thought that a fly would have taken off by now, but they just hang out. And somehow they avoided my rough housing in here. And I believe I saw another one there. Yep, another black soldier fly. It looks like its wings haven't even really formed. This little guy seems like oops. Seems a lot more active. And I'm wondering if it's even a black soldier fly. It looks a little bit different, but I believe it is. But it looks like its wings have not even really unfolded yet. Must have just come out of its shell, or whatever they call its old skin from when it's a larvae and turns into a fly. So alright, I just figured I'd give a quick little close-up of the black soldier flies that I actually noticed here after things settled down. But let's move on over into the outdoor worm bin and release the worms we gathered. So now here in what I consider to be my outdoor worm bin, you can see there's a piece of plywood covering up the cardboard, and the cardboard's in great shape. It's because I've actually been keeping this container covered with the trash pail. So the trash pail that we're resting on top of right now is actually used as a cover to protect the the contents of this bin from any sort of rummaging creatures that might be either coming in here to try to take advantage of the food that's been put in here for the worms, or maybe even coming after the worms. And I think before we place in the new batch of worms that we're going to be relocating into here today, we could take a quick look around inside this bin to see how things are progressing. I always find that the material in this bin is just the perfect level of moisture and consistency, and it's always so loose and flaky. And you can see lots and lots of peanut shells have come over with each of these relocations of worms out of the outdoor worm bin over into here. And let's see, what do we have here? Some of this stuff here, this is all cuttings. I had done some trimming of my cucumber plants, and this was just put in here, I don't know, maybe a month ago at this point, quite some time ago. And there's other things in here, like this stem of a pumpkin. Seems to be working down quite nicely at this point. And now we're also starting to see some signs of the head of lettuce that was put in here. And I gotta say, it was pretty rotted. So when I placed it in here a few days ago, 3 days ago, it was looking pretty nasty. So I'm not even sure how much of it we're gonna find in here. I'm really quite surprised to see how little of it remains. I mean, this was seriously an entire head of lettuce. And I could see a few leaves here and there. And this is kind of what it looked like, which is kind of gross. Yeah, it was in the bottom of the refrigerator, and even left a little puddle in the drawer, which had to be cleaned up. But I see very little signs of it. The only sign that I see is a whole bunch of worms that came out to take advantage of it. So you can see all these worms. These are all worms that have been placed in here from the outdoor compost bin. We've got ourselves a pretty good sized population in here at this point. They're all keeping themselves nice and busy with the lettuce. But it might be time to give this bin some more food at some point soon. I'm not going to bother with that today. I was just curious to see how the last feeding is holding up, and it's not really holding up too good after only 3 days. It's virtually gone at this point. And I think that, you know, after today's addition of more worms, I think we are going to be gradually getting to the point where the population in this bin is going to be, you know, many thousands of worms, which means we'll just have to make sure we're giving them a plentiful supply of food on a pretty regular basis. Alright, sorry about the orientation of the camera, kind of going all over the place there. I was not paying close attention. But that's the one thing I always get a kick out of. Something about these outdoor worm bins, the material in them always seems so nice and loose. It never seems to get, you know, overly damp. Maybe it's because the fabric container breathes so well. But it's not a very deep bin. You can see that it's only a few inches deep. I've been piling in lots and lots of bedding, plenty of leafy matter alongside whatever foods that I've been putting in here. And you know, here too you can see another rubber band. Maybe in here I'm going to try to take a little bit greater care in not putting in just anything and trying to pick out anything that doesn't really belong in here. But yeah, I think we're at the point where we can go ahead and release the worms that we bought over from the outdoor composting bin. Let them get situated in their new home. Another label. Let's get rid of that too. Enter the new worms. Hopefully, because of the bright light, a lot of them have gone down to the bottom of the container. So maybe when we flip it over, we'll get a better view of how many of them we've got. And I'll also kind of spread the pile out a little bit so we can get a better view of what we got too. So let's release them and see what we ended up with. Oh yeah. Definitely looks like we got ourselves quite a number of worms in here. That's what I like to see. Well, let's give these little guys a few minutes to get situated. And then we can get things covered up here and let everyone get back to work. Well, I stepped away for a minute just to wash my glove off and to wash the plastic container that we moved the worms over in. But other than a few little squirmy creatures I could see here and there moving around, you know, I could see some black soldier fly larvae. I think the ones that are a little bit slower on the move are the ones that are approaching that point where they're ready to just go dormant and pupate into a fly. But as far as the worms are concerned, it looks like they've all burrowed down into the bedding here and made themselves at home. So we're pretty much done here. All I've got left to do now is get things covered back up here. I'll return this plastic to cover up the material. But before I do, I'm going to put a few handfuls of leaves in here. Since the material that came over with the worms is a little bit gooey and sticky, I just figured this provides a little level of protection to keep the plastic bag from getting all messy. I mean, it's not a big deal for it to get dirty, but I like to try to keep it a little bit clean if possible. I don't know what this is. I think it's like a little slug or something. I'm not sure if they're good to have in a worm bin, so I think I'm just going to toss this little guy out. But you can also see a worm that was stuck to the plastic when we removed it. Another slug I'm going to get rid of here. I like to use the plastic as a covering to keep the moisture in the bin, because you notice that the material is nice and flaky, nice and loose. I believe if it weren't for the plastic, it might get a little bit drier than it needs to be, so I want it to remain nice and damp and cozy for the worms. I wouldn't want it to exceedingly dry out, so I think the plastic covering does a nice job keeping the moisture in the container. So that's it for today, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. We've probably now got ourselves, I don't know, something in the neighborhood of 3,000 worms. If you got an idea of how many worms we just placed in here just from seeing that, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, so please put that into the comments section. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. Also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's always really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.